Hi, welcome to the Bridge to Belonging Summit, how to include all students in the K-12 classroom. I'm Regina, your host, and today we have with us Dr. Kristy Taylor. Dr. Taylor is a certified professional career and master mindset life coach with over 20 years of expertise in K-14 education, program development, mentoring, and coaching. She strategically leverages her background to support individual clients, small businesses, educational institutions, and nonprofit organizations. As the founder of Work Solutions LLC and Career Coach RX, the coaching branch of Work Solutions, Dr. Taylor passionately dedicates herself to transforming organizations and reshaping lives and careers. Her specialty areas include burnout prevention, stress management, resiliency, diversity and inclusion, and leadership development. At Career Coach RX, she employs an action-oriented, one-to-one coaching model, empowering clients to overcome self-limiting beliefs and achieve their career goals. She partners with clients to create custom career branding documents and to provide professional presence and confidence coaching. Dr. Taylor believes that each of us has the innate ability to achieve our highest potential. Welcome to our summit, Dr. Taylor.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm excited I know we're going to have an organic interview with lots of questions and information, but overall, I'm excited to discuss this topic of inclusive learning for teachers and teacher well-being and nurturing environments for all, because I know what it's like to be an instructor and a teacher in that classroom and trying to accommodate all of the different learning styles. And I'm using this as an opportunity to not only discuss inclusive learning, but also to discuss teacher well-being. So I'm really excited to infuse the two, right, of how we can create and cultivate these inclusive environments and use this as an opportunity to allow ourselves not to burn out.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about diversifying how we're teaching and we like all these things we keep adding to the plate of how to be a great teacher,
Yep.
except for how to not completely burn out from trying to do all the things.
I mean, it's. Let me give you some facts, right? Because I've been there. Like I said, I've been in education for 20 years, and in fact, I've spent most of my career in adult education, but I have taught in K-4. I was a fourth grade teacher for a few years, and I literally just was teaching in K-4 last year. I had it was a one classroom model, and so I had all of the students in grade K-5. And I know and I completely understand what it is like to have to adapt those learning styles. So I just want to hit you with a few facts, right? When it comes to this and why it's so important that we, go through the process of really, and throughout this discussion, I'm going to give you a toolbox of, as teachers, what we can have in our toolbox, in our arsenal, so that we do not burn out, right? So here's a couple of things. One, there's a high prevalence of burnout. That's a big issue among teachers. According to research, a significant percentage of educators, they experience symptoms of burnout at some points in their career. And it is because of workload, and we know this one, a lack of resources, and the challenging classroom dynamics, which again, when we're talking about trying to ensure that all students feel included, we can burn ourselves out doing it, right? Another or a couple of other examples of facts that as teachers, we're working long hours. Teachers, we often work long hours beyond the standard school day. It's not just a 7 to 3:30, right? I will say, being a college professor, once I transitioned to adult higher ed, it was a little bit different. But I will say, I worked with a lot of kids in high school. I worked, dual enrollment, a lot of young people coming into my campus. So just because I left the K-12, that's why I say K-14, because it was still the same, right? I might have had a little bit more flexibility, but also it could be just as long, because now you're not only mentoring them for the educational piece, but now you become life coach as well as they move into those teenage years. And this really has an impact on retention, because teachers are burnout. There's a higher level of turnover and attrition, and there's a level of feeling dissatisfaction and a disconnectedness to something that you started out with a passion for, which is pretty amazing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as we talk about the importance of being able to have an adaptable classroom and going through the process and the steps of making sure that all of our students feel included in the process, we can actually use the techniques that we're going to discuss today as a way to empower ourselves and empower our students, because by having that arsenal and toolbox, we're going to be able to manage stress a little bit better. And so that's, really what I'm looking forward to sharing today.
That sounds awesome. And I love when things like match up. I can use this in my classroom for my students, and I can use this for me. I don't have to learn two separate things. That's great.
It's really cool because, right, because the benefits of being able to have an adaptable classroom, so let's talk about some benefits for students. One, the students, you're actually accommodating those students, their diverse learning styles, right? And
Yeah.
then by having this adaptable classroom where you're supporting all students, you're promoting a classroom environment where you're promoting empathy and understanding towards each other. So as we go through and we talk about some of the things in this toolbox of making students feel included, and that's including using inclusive language, modular learning. So we'll talk about those techniques. But you also increase the likelihood of positive academic outcomes. Students are more motivated, they're more prepared for the real world. And that kind of touches on what I'm saying when it comes to creating these environments of empathy and understanding, right? Because I think that sometimes that we forget as educators when we're talking about children in K through 5, K through 12, or even talking about those early adulthood kids, youth, well, go adults, like, my Miss Taylor, I'm in college. But, we're talking about these age groups. We're not just teaching them subject matter, right? We do really at all levels. We're kind of the parent and the life coach. We're teaching them skills, and we're teaching them important things that's going to prepare them for the real world. And the other benefit is helping them to increase their problem solving skills, which are all of these things they need for the real world, and all of these things they need to be in the workforce. And then from our perspective, when we have this arsenal of tools where we're able to adequately support students, and it's kind of like, okay, it's a no-brainer. I know that I have this in my arsenal. It helps to increase job satisfaction. So, it's always going to be tough as teachers, right? As educators, we're always going to be working with limited resources. It's just always going to be a challenge, But there's a little bit more personal growth and professional growth, because to develop that toolkit that you need, you really do have to, you got to prepare ahead of time. You got to just know. And it's not, so I'm going to give some things today, but you have to know what works for you. And I remember when I was teaching fourth grade, do you ever see, like, on TV where the it'll be like the guess how many cookies are in the jar? Like, it's, a little activity where you have the kids do it. So I remember doing this, right? And I had my class was, fourth grade. It was an inclusive classroom, because in Texas that was mandatory, inclusive classroom, and I had a paraprofessional. And so I was expected to adapt the curriculum, which I always did, of course. But I remember I was so excited about this. I prepared a PowerPoint slide. I remember, I had it all pretty, and I had the cookies in the jar, because this was supposed to be teaching the fourth graders basic algebraic techniques. So I came in there and I set the classroom up that day. And I remember that lesson went left because the students were more excited about the cookies in the jar. I could not get past question number one. So Miss Hillary, are we going to get to eat the cookies? Are we going to? It's, do we get to eat them at the lunch? Do we get the, so I couldn't even, I had to go back and redo that whole lesson the next day, right, without the cookies, and just use a power. So the other thing is just understanding that even if you have this arsenal, sometimes it can still go left, but you have to be willing to try different things, right? And having that arsenal and promoting an environment where teachers working together, it fosters a positive school culture, and it helps to lower burnout rates. So when we create those environments, it's really a dual process of helping students to feel included, but it's also we're supporting each other more as educators, and when we can look to each other for ideas and support, and not just I'm in a classroom alone and I have a network, that really helps to prevent some of those feelings of burnout and frustration that teachers are experiencing.
All right, sounds great. So let's hear about some of these things that are in the toolbox.
Okay, so first I want to talk about I have 8 strategies, right?
All right,
First I want to talk about let's talk about varied instructional material, right? It provides providing students with diverse things like text, audio, video, hands-on activities, right? Accommodating different learning styles. This is going to help to ensure that your students can access content in ways that suit their individual preferences and needs. So when we talk about having an inclusive classroom environment, the first thing that really should come to mind are the different learning styles. So you have these activities, right? But in your creative arsenal, what are some things that you can do to adapt to different learning styles of students? Because when it comes to the benefit for the student is what they're going to have an opportunity to learn in a style that fits them, whether it's musically. When I taught my inclusion classroom last year, I had some students who were special needs students. And one of my young ladies, she was at that point, she was basically had been nonverbal. And so I started to look for different ways to include her, right? And so I started turning on videos, that taught letters through music and sound. My God, I watched this little girl blossom really quickly. And because we figured out that was her thing, right? So when you are automatically are going into your lesson planning process with the mindset of like, okay, I have all of these kids in the classroom. They're all hyperactive. Some of them are gifted. Some of them may need more remediation. But what are some just in general? How can I adapt to learning styles? So start there, right? I have a lesson. How can I adapt to learning styles? These are different things that I can just have in my toolbox. Because the way that's going to work for you is if you're going in it thinking, how can I provide these visual aids, tools, music, things to get students moving and going and engaged from the get-go, right? And you have kind of all of that as just a natural part of your lesson plan. It's going to help you reduce stress because now you have multiple avenues to convey information. And if you are finding that the way that you're doing an activity is not working, then you can easily just switch to another. Because I mean, it would be 1 minute that I'm trying to get let me help you to write your letters, right? But it wasn't going over well. But as soon as I turn on that video where they have to write or have them get up and write and trace on the board where they're doing stuff, I mean, those are things that really engage. Another example would be, flexible options. So depending on which grade level you're teaching, flexible assessment options, things like projects, presentations. Like I don't know if it's like the Montessori style or exact word I'm looking for, where you kind of some of your older students you can kind of lay out if you want to A on this project, this is what it's going to look like. You can do it in a presentation form. You can do it a test. You can give them the option to choose, right? Based on, do you want a research paper, a presentation, a test? Give them some options that they can choose from. And that's also inclusive of that learning style, right? Because you're allowing students a few different options for some of the major things because it helps them to showcase their understanding of and their strengths. And what does it do for you? Again, when it comes to reducing stress, it goes back to that multiple avenues of you convey the information, but we want to make sure that the student is able to present it. Some students don't respond well to testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to get them different options. Now, feel free to butt in because I am.
Well, you know what? We have a situation where we have a natural talker and a natural listener. So, I was thinking while you were talking about that, is that it also gives the students some ownership over what they're doing, even though it's just a simple choice. Like you've already mapped it out. It's not like you're changing anything, but for that student, they made a choice about what they wanted to do instead of just being told, oh, you must do this particular thing.
Yeah, it really is empowering to the student. And I think that you have more buy-in from students when, again, you've already just went into the lesson with consideration for all types of learning styles, right? But then now you're approaching the assessment from the perspective of giving the student an opportunity. And the cool thing is that when you design these options, you can design it in a way where the grading process is not overtaxing to you. So, like, if you consider offering the student an option, but you feel like, man, this is going to take me a long time to grade that, that's just kind of adding to my plate, right? Then take that option off. So you have some flexibility in terms of how you want to approach that process. And it kind of also plays into my next point, which was technology. We have the advantage today of using like adaptable learning technology. Like I used to, use a lot of Khan Academy, like things like that, free resources. Then also we had like Study Island, like things we used to pay for. But when we talk about setting up modular learning, I would have some students working on the computer. They're doing adaptable learning. Some students were in reading circles. Some students were, and so having that around the classroom, module set up for learning, and you kind of already know what's going to be done in each module, but it's allowing students to again learn at their level, go at their pace, do something that they're interested in. Because the whole thing, right, is about the student. And we're, to your point, Regina, we're giving the students options. We're also allowing them to take some ownership of the experiences that they're learning experiences. And part of that process is clear communication, right? So item number 4 in my toolkit is clear communication. When you set these things up, you got to be clear. You got to set, the visual aids you use, the examples that you use to demonstrate about what's going to be done for the projects, for the modules that you're setting up, for the way that you're adapting the learning for the students. You got to be very clear about that, because when it comes to you managing your stress, when you're not clear as an educator and teacher how you're communicating, the misunderstandings are going to be frustrating, right? And clear communication promotes active student engagement, and it lowers your level of stress because you see the students, and routine helps, right? You might change up, you might be changing up like what's happening in this module. Like if this is a module where they're expected to read, right? If this is a reading area in the class, well, they know when they go there what the expectations are for reading, but they might be reading different books or researching different topics, but the expectations are still the same. Okay.
Yeah.
What else? Here's something I love to do. I like to pair students up. I like to pair them up when I see I was observing about relationships, observing about which students are supporting each other. But one thing I would encourage teachers to be very careful of, right? You might have high performing students in your classroom. You pair them up with some of your students who are mid to lower level, but also pair them up with each other too, right? Make sure that they're able to bounce and learn off of each other, because good flexible seating arrangements, understanding the physical layout of the classroom, understanding how to properly pair students up. Again, bringing in things like fidget toys, if they're not throwing them, it just depends on the class, right? How hyper they are, or fighting over them. But you setting up and cultivating a learning environment that is comfortable for the students, they know who they can work with, and also diversifying that, not letting the same students work together all the time, mixing it up a little bit, and continuing to challenge them. That's going to help create a routine and reduce your level of stress too, because the students need routine, but they need clear instruction too.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight something that you kind of like said, but didn't kind of push out, in that where, have fidget toys, unless your class is going to throw them around. With any of these toolbox, entries, you want to think to yourself, is this going to work with my students? Because some years it might, some years it might not, right? And it's all about choosing the right tools. So when you like watch videos like this, and you're like, oh, well, that's never going to work in my classroom. Well, maybe, or maybe how could I make it work in my classroom? Or maybe I just put that in my toolbox, and that's going to be something I'm going to be thinking about to see where I can input it somewhere else later, right? Everything is always, diversify and for your own class too. Like, what's going to work for me and my class, and put that in the toolbox, and then the other stuff just stick to the side, like, oh, maybe this will be useful some other time, but right now this class, it's not going to be, for us.
It's that cookie in the jar example I gave earlier, right? We're not talking. I just knew that my students, they were going to focus. Those cookies was going to be no. They wanted the cookies right then, and there was no math lesson that day. And then I found that some of the simplest things, used to work in my class. Like, those, how you can roll out those big sheets of paper. Sometimes we use them to like decorate the class, or to hang up to what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I used to do this simple thing, which was I would get these long sheets of paper and I would move the desk out, to the side, get them with this, and I roll the paper out the length of the classroom. And I would have math problems cut up in a bag, and I'll call it bag of math. And then they would shake the bag of, each person had a bag of math that they would do. And they would just sit on the floor with their markers and crayons and draw the math problems. So they were practicing writing. They were writing the math problems, so they could pick anywhere on the spot, right? They're writing math problems and they're practicing like multiplication, addition, some of the things that they were having some challenges with. And then that gave me, their students were laid out on the floor comfortable, they writing, they doing math. And then it gave me a chance to walk around and kind of see. So even my students who, because of course, when you have an inclusive classroom, some of my students were like first grade level, right? And so like if I'm doing adapted math, so if I'm teaching multiplication, then that student might have on their IDP, which is actually listed as number 7 here, on their IDP, that they can use a chart, right? But I would still make sure while they're laying out on that floor and they're doing the math that they had the chart. It's because it was part of their IDP. So these students might be doing 47 times 5, but this student is doing 4 times 3, and she has her chart, but she's still on the ground. She's still engaged. She's still doing the same thing as everybody else. And she was an expert at using this chart because, that was a part of her accommodations. So I just think that we have to it's not always about like, oh, I got to create a movie or just do something. Wow. And so it could just be simple. Kids are simple. As complex as they sound, they simple, Yeah. So I kind of already mentioned number 6, which is that collaborative learning structures and environments. But I do want to say this: when we talk about collaborative learning environments and we putting students in groups and pairing them up, don't forget as teachers that we should not be working in silos. And I think that sometimes that's where some of the stress comes from when you get to the point where you're working in a silo and you are just in your class alone all day. Pair up with other teachers. If you guys are not already like doing classroom exchanges, encourage collaborative learning. It reduces the burden just on the individual teachers because you have a supportive peer environment. Share responsibilities, share resources, share strategies, create a community that is supportive of each other to alleviate the stress. Like, there's nobody in this group that's not stressed out. I mean, we all start strong in August. By the Labor Day, we're ready for that break. By Thanksgiving, we're half dead, and Christmas, we're completely strung out. So,
yeah, dude, I'm feeling that right now.
So, so number 7 would be the individualized learning plans. Now, I'm not going to harp on this one because we all know that if you're teaching and you're working in an inclusive classroom environment, all students are going to be students who need that support. They're required to have those individual education plans. So that's not something that's dynamic or out of the box, right? That's actually a requirement. But understanding and having it done early on and actually implementing it and adhering to it by using those adaptable strategies, that's what's going to help you, right? And it also gives you that support and documentation that was done. So the example I used where I had all of the students on the floor doing math, well, all of the students who could be on the floor were doing math. And I don't care if I handed a bag with math problems that said 2 + 2 and 2 times 2, if that student was on a IEP, right? but she was still engaged. And then for my students who necessarily couldn't, they were doing things with the paraprofessional to of the same thing. I might have had a table set up where paper rolled out where they could color and do it just according to what they could do. But everybody is included, right? Nobody's left out.
Yes.
So, and the last piece for me that I just want to emphasize is the the inclusive language, right? Using inclusive language and examples in teaching materials. You know, we've long passed the stage where everything was he. We just said he, and then meant universal she, he, whatever, you know, right? But in today's society, we want to make sure that we want all students to feel comfortable that we're using inclusive, diverse perspectives, cultural references, culturally competent education. When I taught in Texas, I remember we get ready to do the state exams, and you know, like one of the practice prompts would be, tell me about a day that it snowed. Like write a paragraph about a day that it snowed. And I'm like, first of all, we live in the middle of Texas. How these kids have never seen snow, right? How they gonna tell you about a day that snowed? Like, you got to make sure that the stuff is relevant to the population that we're teaching. Like, these kids don't know anything about snow. They know about what it's like to be hot and muggy and wearing shorts in December.
That reminds me. So I'm a science teacher, and way back in the beginning of my career, I was teaching about how we know like how old fossils are. Well, the terminology in science is to say that you date the fossil. You're doing radioactive dating, like, and so you date the fossil. And so I'm like, they use carbon, blah, 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 blah. And this kid raises her hand and she's like, Miss, I don't understand. Are you taking this fossil to the movies? And like, it had not even occurred to me that, because I'm used to using that word in the scientific. But she had a point. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, you know what? You're right. That's a great question. This is one of those words that we use differently in real life than we do in science. And it didn't even occur to me that I got these kids sitting there like, and they're all sitting there like, do, but they're thinking to themselves, what do you mean you're taking a fossil on a date? What the heck? So, maybe.
They are kids or something. I remember. That's still I was trying to teach earlier this year. I was working with my kids and I was teaching them about Black history. It's February. And so here I get to, which to me, it was so funny, but it was such an insult because kids are kids, right? Kids go, oh, I'm teaching about Rosa Parks getting on the bus. And one of my kids go, Miss Taylor, are you as old as Rosa Parks? Did you know her? I'm like, I was like, I'm offended, but it was so funny. Like they're not making the link that I'm not as old as Rosa Parks. But kids are wonderful. And, it's important for us to, sometimes we just are so, here's what we're doing, right? We're not even realizing that they're not even making the connection, right? So just like, are you as old as Rosa Parks? Did you know her? Are you taking fossils to the movie? But using things like gender inclusive language, avoiding overuse of titles, instead of saying, I really like when we talk about children in wheelchairs, we may have to use language that's sensitive to different abilities, like avoid terms like that carry negative connotations. Like instead of saying disabled, we can say person with a disability because we're focusing on the person rather than the impairment, right? Right. And then if you're writing content, like make examples where you're including the student may have a disability, right? So make examples where you're showing this. Maybe if it's a math problem that you're writing or a case study that you're be inclusive. Make sure the students feel inclusive. So when you do this, it's going to help you because these are things that are in your toolbox. notice that they're very generic because it goes back to what you said, right? These are techniques, and then you have to take the techniques and you have to be the person that'll figure out if this works in your classroom. Now, from an organizational standpoint, how can we support each other? As an organization, as teachers, we go back to that collaborative approach and be in partnership with each other. If you got something in your classroom that's working, share it with the rest of us, because it's March and my hair is falling and I'm just trying to make it to May, right? Because we've gone through all of the holidays. And institutions should also be providing professional development and support, looking for ways to take some of the stress off of teachers. I might not can grade your papers for you, but is there something I can do to make this process easier in terms of administrative tools and being realistic? Like, creating these environments where I don't just come into as an administrator. I'm not just going to come to the meeting and just start the meeting. How about I check on my staff to see how we're doing and have a conversation, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's it going today? Like check on people to make sure they have real feelings. And, just being aware and offering opportunities for well-being. And the final piece I'll say is just what can we do as individuals? We talked a lot about what we can do to support students, right? But as individuals, as teachers, you got to learn to say no to. You got to establish some boundaries. Maybe it's not a good idea at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night when you should be watching a movie that you're grading papers. Prioritize self-care, learn to say no, set realistic goals, look for ways to develop yourself, and just sometimes take you a break. Like, it's okay to take a Christmas break. It's a Christmas break, right? It says winter break, so that means we need to be on break.
Yes. And and as teachers, we're not great at doing that. Like, that's not a skill anywhere in our training that's ever like fostered in us to learn how to take a break. It took me like 3 years of breaking my back, bringing papers back and forth from school that never, ever, ever, ever got graded at home, for me to be like, I got to figure out how to do this at school, because I'm breaking my back, bringing them home with me every single day. My bag I plop it down in its plop spot, and then I pick it up the next morning. It's never moved. Nothing been taken out of it. And it took me forever to learn, like, okay, well, I need to see what I can do. Maybe I can come into work a little bit earlier because I'm a little bit more coherent in the morning, as opposed to in the afternoon when I don't want to do nothing. Never mind grade stuff, which is like the worst thing ever in my universe. It's like, I really have to like psych myself up to do it.
Because at least when we teaching science and math, you can be a little bit more straightforward. But English teachers, my God, I have they have my condolences. They have my sympathy. But I always say, like, when you have like big stuff to grade, big projects, like, do a little bit every day. Like, if I got 25 or 30 students, don't expect this paper back today, right? Maybe I do like 5 or 6 a day, just depending on my time, because I don't want to burn myself out. And then also as teachers, and I used to make this mistake, grading, I felt like everything needed to be a grade. Like, especially when you had to threaten them and get them a pop quiz. You know what I mean? So be strategic about what you're grading. Like, don't overload yourself with trying to grade everything.
And sometimes completion is okay too. Like, if they're just doing like practice, do you really need to, grade all 20 math problems? Like, did they work on it? Were you watching them work on it? You know that they worked on it? Okay, great, they did it. And save yourself that agony of going through and grading every single problem.
Yeah, and if you're a new teacher, man, don't burn yourself out with the fantasy of what this thing is supposed to look like. You're gonna go through trial and error. You just keep the best attitude that you can, right? Just be open to continuing to learn, because again, I've been at this for a long time, 20 years, and I'm still learning. I mean, I still will go in the classroom sometimes, watch it blow up.
Yeah, absolutely. Blow up. Last year I started teaching a new course, and I flat out, and I mean, it's a little easier. I teach, it's 11th and 12th graders, so you can kind of like be human with them. I was like, listen, you guys, this is the first time I've taught this, and like I studied this in college. I've got lots of information up here, but I've never tried to teach it to anyone else. So sometimes we're going to do stuff and it's not going to work out that well. And it's just what's going to happen. We're doing a giant year-long experiment this year.
You ever been in the middle of teaching and then you just real like you teaching the lesson and then you probably get about 10 minutes in and then you realize, oh my God, this ship is sinking because you see it on the student's face.
Mm-hmm.
So just, do what you can, and just know that this whole experience is a learning process. I mean, we're always growing. And if you look, you're going to reach a point of burnout at some point because it's just natural, but you can try to prevent that as much as you can. And I think the thing, what happens when you reach that point is that sometimes we reach that point, we're so frustrated and angry. And that's why, for some people, it's no turning back. And I'm not going to, as a coach, I never give people the speeches of, remember why you did this. You knew why you was doing it when you went into it, right? Because we knew that we weren't going to be making about $40,000, so we know why we're doing it. So we don't need that speech.
Right.
But we have to just remember that self-care is important. Like, I definitely didn't come into this because I was going to be rich, right? I knew why I was doing it. So, but sometimes you might need to slightly remind yourself of that and remind yourself of the days when students make you laugh or you see their personalities coming out and you see them, progressing, or they stopping by your room to hang out for no reason. And you realize that the impact goes far beyond what you are teaching or why you initially thought you would be doing this, right? That you really are shaping the lives in the future of the next generation of you.
Yes, absolutely. And this has been a fantastic conversation. Like, I would love to continue talking for the next hour, but we are starting to run short on time. So one of the things that I'm doing, because it's, really hard for someone to get to know someone, first of all, on video, and then this little short piece of time. So I've been doing this or that quick questions to kind of get some ideas out of you. Ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. All right. First one, cake or pie?
Cake.
Cake. All right.
Red velvet specifically.
Chocolate milk or hot chocolate?
Hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate with heavy cream. We don't even want milk. We want cream.
Oh, my mom never always made hot chocolate with water. She would never, she wouldn't even put milk in it. And then when I started living on my own and I actually read the directions for myself, I was like, you can put milk in this? And I made it. I was like, oh, this is good.
Funny is, after being a broke college student and I could put milk in my hot chocolate, that was the peak of richness and fine living for me. And not just milk, but also when you can buy the hot chocolate with the marshmallows. Oh my gosh. I
Yes. Yes. I was just flabbergasted. I was like, my mom's been putting water in it. She could have been putting milk in this. What the heck?
Well, as kids, we fascinated with anything as long as we get chocolate.
Yeah. All right, one more. Yeah. Do anything for chocolate. It shuts you up for a couple of minutes too, right. Right. All right, awesome. So let us know a little bit about your free gift and how people can contact you if, on the social medias and the interwebs, whatever you want to call it.
So my free gift is the Career Mindset Transformation course, because when we talk about this whole thing about burnout, we have put together a list of at this point, hundreds of resources that we have, and we put it in a course form and this course contains everything from meditations and positive affirmations to get you remotivated in your career. It contains resources like to help you do your resume, beef up your LinkedIn, just in case you need to look for another teaching job or any job, right? But it's just a course full of sources. You can take all of the modules, that we have in terms of cultivating a positive mindset and preparing yourself to go to the next step in your career, or you might just only need maybe to listen to the meditations or the positive affirmations. And so I'm really all about with work solutions, again, being able to support organizations and guide you through this process of burnout and resiliency and really reflecting on organizational processes. And I do that through work solutions. And my coaching branch, which is where I'm going to share my social media. If you need one-on-one support, you're looking for strategies to cultivate a positive mindset, you can really find me on all social media, Pinterest, TikTok, Facebook at Career Coach RX, right? And then I have a YouTube channel, which is the Career Coach RX. And then I also just recently launched the Career Coach RX podcast, and we are available on Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartMusic.
All right. Awesome.
So
that sounds like an awesome resource. And make sure that you follow Dr. Taylor on all of those there's lots of options. So pick your favorite social media and go follow her. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it was a pleasure having you. This was a fantastic conversation, and we will talk with everyone next time.